Right now, someone with half your talent is building the life you dream about, not because they're smarter, not because they're luckier, but because they did the one thing you refused to do. They bet on themselves. And you're still sitting on the sideline, rehearsing excuses, calling it caution, calling it wisdom, calling it being realistic. But deep down you know the truth. You are paralyzed by fear. Your brain has built a prison out of comfort and convinced you it's a fortress. Loss aversion, that's what psychologists call it. Your mind is literally wired to fear losing more than it desires winning. Fear kills dreams. And that ancient survival mechanism, it's not protecting you anymore, it's destroying you. Today, we're going to dismantle the psychological cage you've built around yourself. We'll expose the 10 mechanisms your mind uses to keep you small, stuck, and afraid. And by the end, you'll understand exactly why comfort is the most dangerous addiction of the 21st century. A ship in harbor is safe, but that is not what ships are built for. So let's begin. The comfort cage. Here's something nobody tells you about comfort zones. They don't feel like cages. They feel like home. That's what makes them so dangerous. You wake up, follow the same routine, avoid the same risks, and tell yourself this is stability. But stability and stagnation wear the same disguise. Psychologist Abraham Maslow identified this decades ago. He said humans have two fundamental drives, the drive toward growth and the drive toward safety. And here's the brutal truth. Most people choose safety every single time without even realizing it. Your comfort zone is not a neutral space, it's a shrinking space. Every day you stay inside it, it gets smaller. The things that once felt manageable start feeling overwhelming. That presentation you could have given last year, now it terrifies you. That business idea you shelved, now it feels impossible. Comfort shrinks you. Your brain interprets the absence of threat as the presence of safety, but they are not the same thing, not even close. You're not safe in your comfort zone, you're slowly suffocating. And the worst part, you've gotten so used to the lack of oxygen that you've forgotten what it feels like to breathe. But this is just the surface. Because underneath that comfort lies something far more primal. Loss aversion trap. In 1979, Daniel Kahneman and Amos Tversky published a paper that changed everything we thought we knew about human decision-making. They called it prospect theory. And at its core was a discovery so fundamental it earned Kahneman a Nobel Prize. Losses loom larger than gains. The pain of losing something is psychologically twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining the same thing. Read that again. Your brain experiences a $100 loss with the same intensity as a $200 gain. This isn't a personality flaw. This is ancient neural architecture. 50,000 years ago, losing your food supply meant death. Losing your shelter meant death. Your ancestors who feared loss the most survived the longest. And that survival wiring is still running your decisions today. Every time you think about starting that business, quitting that job, or making that leap, your amygdala fires up with the same intensity as if a predator were chasing you. Your palms sweat, your stomach tightens, your mind floods with worst-case scenarios, and you interpret that biological alarm as evidence that you shouldn't act. But that alarm isn't wisdom. It's an outdated warning system screaming about dangers that no longer exist. Now that you understand the mechanism keeping you frozen, hit like and subscribe to keep exploring the depths of your psyche with me. Because what comes next reveals how this trap gets even worse. Status quo bias. There's another cognitive bias working against you, and this one is even sneakier. It's called status quo bias. Psychologists William Samuelson and Richard Zeckhauser documented it in 1988, and the findings were devastating. When presented with multiple options, people overwhelmingly prefer whichever option maintains their current situation, even when the alternatives are objectively better. Default equals defeat. Think about that job you've been meaning to leave for 3 years. Think about that city you've been wanting to move from. Think about that relationship that stopped growing long ago. You know what you need to do, but something keeps you anchored. Your brain treats any change from the current state as a potential loss. And remember what we just learned, losses feel twice as painful as gains. So your mind performs this invisible calculation. It takes the certain discomfort of your current life and weighs it against the uncertain possibility of something better. And every time, certainty wins. Every time. Not because your current situation is good, but because it's known. You are choosing familiar pain over unfamiliar possibility. You're paying rent on a life you don't even want to live in. And the longer you stay, the higher the cost of leaving feels. This is how people spend decades in lives that were only meant to be temporary. But there's a deeper layer to this. Fear of judgment. Let's talk about the fear you'll never admit you have. The fear of being watched, judged, laughed at. Psychologist Mark Leary calls it the sociometer theory. Your self-esteem is essentially a gauge, a real-time monitor of how accepted you feel by others. And when that gauge drops, when you sense disapproval or rejection, your brain treats it as a survival threat. The greatest prison people live in is the fear of what other people think. This isn't vanity, this is evolution. For our ancestors, social rejection meant exile from the tribe, and exile meant death. So your brain developed an exquisitely sensitive alarm system for social disapproval. The problem, that alarm now fires when you think about posting your business online. It fires when you consider changing careers at 40. It fires when you imagine telling your family you're taking a different path. You are not afraid of failure. You are afraid of being seen failing. There's a massive difference. Failure in private is tolerable. Failure in public feels like annihilation. And so you never start, you never post, you never pitch, you never raise your hand. Not because you can't handle failure, but because you can't handle the imagined audience watching you fail. Their eyes become your chains. And here's where it gets truly insidious. Identity prison. You've built an identity around not taking risks, and now that identity is fighting for its survival. Psychologist Leon Festinger called this cognitive dissonance, the intense discomfort that arises when your actions contradict your beliefs about yourself. Identity controls action. If you've spent years telling yourself you're the careful one, the realistic one, the one who thinks things through, then betting on yourself creates a psychological crisis. Because the act of taking a bold risk contradicts the story you've told yourself for decades. And your brain will do anything to resolve that contradiction. It won't change the story. It will stop the action. You'll suddenly find 100 reasons not to start. You'll call it logic. You'll call it responsibility. But it's your identity defending itself from an update it doesn't want. The person you think you are is blocking the person you could become. James Clear wrote about this brilliantly. He said the most effective way to change your behavior is to change your identity first. But here's the catch, you can't change your identity without taking actions that contradict it. It's a paradox. You need to act differently to become different, but your current self fights every attempt to act differently. You must betray who you were to become, who you need to be. And that brings us to something even more disturbing about your relationship with risk. Overthinking loop. You think you're being strategic, you think you're gathering information, planning, preparing, but what you're actually doing is hiding. Barry Schwartz, a psychologist at Swarthmore College, identified what he calls the paradox of choice. The more options and information you have, the less likely you are to act. Analysis paralysis is not intelligence. It is fear wearing a lab coat. Every time you say you need to do more research, need to wait for the right moment, need to get just one more certification, you're feeding the loop. Think, worry, plan, doubt, think again, worry more, plan differently, doubt harder. And the loop never ends because it was never designed to produce action. It was designed to produce the feeling of progress without the risk of failure. Think, plan, doubt, repeat. Your brain is brilliant at manufacturing fake productivity. It gives you the dopamine hit of working on your goals without ever requiring you to actually risk anything. You've spent more time thinking about your dream than building it. You've rehearsed more failure scenarios than success stories. Thinking will not overcome fear, but action will. The cure for overthinking isn't more thinking, it's action. Imperfect, terrifying, glorious action. But even when you finally decide to act, there's another mechanism waiting to stop you. Sunk cost fallacy. You've already invested so much time, so much energy, so much of your identity. How could you possibly start over now? This is the sunk cost fallacy, and it's one of the most powerful psychological traps keeping you from betting on yourself. Trapped. Economists and psychologists have documented this for decades. The more you've invested in something, even when it's clearly not working, the harder it becomes to walk away. That degree you spent 4 years earning but never wanted, that career you've spent a decade building but secretly hate, that relationship you've poured your heart into but know is draining you, your brain says you can't leave now, you've already given too much. But here's what your brain gets wrong. Those years, they're gone. Whether you stay or leave, you cannot get them back. The only question that matters is this. Knowing what you know today, would you start this path again? If the answer is no, then every day you continue is a new investment in the wrong direction. You're not honoring your past sacrifice by staying. You're multiplying it. You're adding good years to bad ones and calling it loyalty. The real courage isn't in persisting with what's broken. It's in admitting you need to build something new. And that brings us to perhaps the most invisible barrier of them all. Learned helpless. In 1967, psychologist Martin Seligman conducted an experiment that revealed something heartbreaking about human nature. He discovered that when animals and later humans are repeatedly exposed to situations they can't control, they eventually stop trying, even when the cage door opens. even when freedom is right there. It is not the strongest who survive, nor the most intelligent, but the ones most responsive to change. They just sit there. Seligman called it learned helplessness. And it might be the most accurate description of where you are right now. Think about it. How many times have you tried and failed? How many times did someone tell you it wouldn't work? How many times did you watch your plans crumble? Tried, failed, stopped. After enough repetitions, your brain drew a conclusion: trying leads to pain. So it shut down the trying mechanism altogether. Now, when opportunity knocks, you don't even hear it. When the door opens, you don't move. Not because you're lazy, not because you don't want more, but because your nervous system has encoded a single devastating belief. Nothing you do will make a difference. That belief is a lie, a well-practiced, deeply embedded lie, but a lie nonetheless. And there's a specific reason this lie feels so convincing. Comparison poison. You scroll through your phone and see someone younger, richer, more successful, more attractive, building the exact life you want. And instead of inspiring you, it crushes you. Psychologist Leon Festinger, the same mind who gave us cognitive dissonance, also discovered social comparison theory in 1954. Humans are hardwired to evaluate themselves by comparing against others. You compare your chapter 1 to their chapter 20 and call yourself a failure. But here's what social media has done to this natural mechanism. It has broken it. You're no longer comparing yourself to your neighbor or your colleague. You're comparing yourself to the curated highlights of 8 billion people. Every time you open that app, you're entering a comparison arena you were never designed to survive. And the result is devastating. Instead of thinking, they did it, so maybe I can too, you think, they did it, so what's the point of trying? Their success becomes evidence of your inadequacy rather than proof of what's possible. Their success, your excuse. You use their achievements as a reason to quit before you start, and the cruelest irony, the people you're comparing yourself to were once exactly where you are now, afraid, uncertain, wondering if they had what it takes. They just decided to bet on themselves anyway, which brings us to the most important question of all. The first bet. So here you are, you know about loss aversion, you understand the status quo bias, you see the identity trap, the overthinking loop, the sunk cost fallacy, the learned helplessness, the comparison poison. You have the map of every psychological mechanism that's been keeping you small. Now what? 1. Start before you feel ready. 2. Make the smallest possible bet first. 3. Accept imperfection as the price of progress. 4. Detach your identity from the outcome. The truth nobody tells you about betting on yourself is this: the first bet is always the hardest. Not because the stakes are highest, but because you have zero evidence it will work. You're acting on faith in a version of yourself that doesn't exist yet. The only impossible journey is the one you never begin. But here's the psychology that changes everything. Albert Bandura, one of the most influential psychologists in history, discovered that self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to succeed, doesn't come from positive thinking. It comes from mastery experiences, small wins, tiny victories that rewire your nervous system to believe, I can do this. You do not build confidence by thinking, you build it by doing. That's the secret. You don't wait for courage to arrive. You create it. One small terrifying bet at a time. The universe doesn't reward the talented, it rewards the brave. Every mechanism we've explored today has one thing in common. They all require your cooperation to work. Loss aversion needs you to believe the worst-case scenario. Status quo bias needs you to choose the familiar. Your identity prison needs you to stay consistent with who you were. Overthinking needs you to keep planning instead of acting. Every single trap requires one thing: your stillness. Stillness feeds fear. The person who bets on themselves isn't braver than you. They're not smarter than you. They've simply decided that the pain of staying the same is worse than the pain of trying. They made the calculation that you've been avoiding, and they chose differently. You have one life, not a rehearsal, not a rough draft. One shot at becoming the person you know you could be. And every day you wait, that person gets a little further away. 20 years from now, you will be more disappointed by the things you didn't do than by the things you did. If you made it this far, comment all in if you're ready to stop spectating and start betting on yourself. Welcome to the Psyche Project. If this made you rethink your relationship with risk, hit like and subscribe. Understanding yourself is the work of a lifetime. See you in the next one.